Good morning. If our speakers could make their way up upon the steps, and if all of our supporters and people who are here for the Victims' Rights Rally, if y'all would step into the sunlight and join us up here. All right. Here we go. We're missing. Good morning. I'm Sarah Ann Ford. I'm the legal director of the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network. And on behalf of the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network, the South Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, community partners, our steering committee rally, victims and survivors of crime, thank you for being here with us today. We're all wearing these orange ribbons. And if you haven't gotten one, please take one from the table. Orange symbolizes a brighter future for all of us, free from violence, which is our hope. After the success of our first rally last year, stemming from the Bowen Turner sexual assault cases out of Orangeburg, we decided that an annual rally was necessary to show our support for and advocate for all victims and survivors of crime in South Carolina. Victims' rights are not suggestions, they are the law. Victims deserve to have a system that works for them and with them, not against them. Far too often, victims and survivors are treated like afterthoughts in our system. And while South Carolina has substantial victims' rights protecting crime victims, if they are not asserted by crime victims and enforced by our courts, they are meaningless. I stand here today asking each of you to educate yourselves on those rights, protecting the dignity of and the fairness and respect for all victims. When you see rights being sidestepped or trampled upon, stand up, say something. Any of us can be a victim advocate. You don't need to be certified, you don't need to be in law enforcement, you don't need to be a victims' rights lawyer. You can help victims and survivors. They are counting on us to center their rights, center their voices, in a system where they are pushed to the side. Well, they are not pushed to the side today. Victims are at the heart of who we are and why we are here. What I hear consistently from crime victims is, I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. So today we're going to hear from some incredible speakers, people who have suffered tremendous losses, but who have channeled their loss into seeking justice for themselves and for others. Changing laws and challenging the status quo, and folks who wish to give a voice to victims. Our first speaker is Representative Brandon Guffey. Representative Guffey represents District 48 in York County. Representative Guffey introduced House Bill 3583 to criminalize sexual extortion, a crime that affects so many, in memory of his son, Gavin. Representative Guffey is advocating to hold perpetrators accountable, protect children, and raise awareness about the dangers and consequences of sextortion. He's a strong advocate for crime victims, and I'm pleased to introduce him here.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. As Sarah said, the one thing that sticks with you is whenever a crime happens is that you don't want this to happen to another family. And that has been my passion. I lost my son, Gavin, in July of 2022. And I'd never heard of the crime previously. As I started to dive in, I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue. I just won my primary, wasn't sure if I wanted to go into politics. And my wife said, "You're one of the few people with a voice that can actually get up there and do something." So since I've came to Columbia, that has been my number one goal, is coming in. I've dove in. As they say, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. I can definitely say that is true. And trying to understand how our justice system works. I've seen it from afar with victims like we have for the family of Larry Vaughn that's here today out of Rock Hill in my area. I've seen how it doesn't appear to be fair. And I've seen that we have a lot of work to do. As I've come in, I'm one of the few freshmen on the Judiciary Committee. Within my first week, I would say the thing that I was shocked about the most was the way that we select our judges. I don't believe that it's fair. Not that I believe a popularity contest is the way to go, but I do believe that judicial reform should be at the top of all of our lists. So I urge each and every one of you to stay in touch with your representatives and your senators to urge and push for judicial reform. We have many bills out there. I just co-sponsored one last week from another freshman that filed it, Representative Joe White. And we've got to get this bill through the House, get it through the Senate, and not just provide lip service to our constituents. It's time for some real change. I appreciate everyone coming out today. I don't know the next speaker to introduce, so I apologize.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Dolores Boyce, a native of Barnwell, South Carolina. She is the mother of two children, the late Damian Green and Delia Boyd, and serves as the assistant pastor at Miller Swamp Missionary Baptist Church. Ms. Boyce is retired from working at the South Carolina Department of Corrections. For the last 8 years, Ms. Boyce has advocated tirelessly for justice for her son Damian, who was murdered in his home on August 6, 2015 in Denmark, South Carolina, where he was living because he was a senior at Voorhees College. Ms. Boyce has faithfully attended every hearing, cooperating with the system, with law enforcement, with the prosecutors. Just before we began planning for this rally, the case was ultimately dismissed just a few short months ago. Ms. Boyce.
Good morning. As Sarah stated, my name is Dolores Boyce, and my son, Damian Melvin Green, was murdered August the 6th, 2015. I am a person of faith who worked my son's case alongside my family tirelessly. The justice system as a whole failed me and my family. We trusted a system who let us down to the point where, in the end, the faith in the judicial system doesn't exist to me because it doesn't work for victims, only accused criminals or high-profile victims. It took SLED and the solicitor's office 4 years and 3 months to call me and my family in to inform us that warrants would be issued in this case. We were told by the solicitor's office that this was one of the hardest work cases they had seen in a while. He told us that they had 2 eyewitnesses that saw the perpetrators go into Damian's home, heard gunshots, and saw the perpetrators leave Damian's home. It was daylight, so this was supposed to be open and shut. However, it was anything but. From day one to this point, SLED had no new evidence. No physical evidence was ever found. Everything was exactly the same from 2015 to 2019. So my question is, why didn't an arrest happen earlier? I'll tell you what they were doing. Nothing. But my family and myself continued working Damien's case. Judges were asking bond hearings. Why did it take so long to make an arrest? Or why is it taking so long to bring this case to trial? I remember going to a bond hearing. It was a continuation bond hearing, and feeling as if my rights were violated because the judge gave the defendant an opportunity to speak and ignored me. It was as if I wasn't even there. And of course, he was granted bond. A bonding company requested a hearing to part ways with this defendant and stated that the defendant was tampering with the monitor and removing it. They wanted to sever their relationship. The judge granted them that. But however, the judge took away the ankle monitor completely and lowered the bond. Yes, a criminal was rewarded for breaking the law again. One of the defendants was allowed out on bond, and it wasn't until I investigated and notified the prosecutor that he committed a crime in Casey, South Carolina, and was a fugitive there. And finally, the bond was revoked. In 2019, 4 years after my son's death, warrants went out for the defendants. The case went to trial 7 years later. In February 2023, we were notified of a bond hearing. The defendant's lawyer, the defendant's lawyer announced that the state's primary witness was dead. The bombshell was dropped. The solicitor's office sat on this case so long, not one, but 2 witnesses died 7 years apart. I have never been given a legitimate answer on several things in this case, and it's sad. We were called to the solicitor's office in February 2023 to let us know that without the primary eyewitnesses, the case would be dismissed. Things seemed wrong early on during this case, so I sought help through SC Van. And I would like to take the opportunity at this moment to thank them for the countless hours that they have helped me and given me confirmation that my thoughts were correct. The judicial system is broken. Victims are barely included in the process. The system is designed for accused criminals or high-profile victims. I left broken and without even an apology. It is my prayer that this system gets fixed. It is my prayer that there needs to be no bond for accused murderers. And also, when these murder trials come to court, that there are someone, a mutual party, that's able to sit in on these trials and make sure that victims are getting what they deserve, making sure the judges are not violating our rights, ensuring that we get a fair chance to allow our family members' legacies to live on. Because at this point, we are failed. We are being failed terribly through the justice system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyce. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Carl Stoller. He's the father of Dallas Stoller, who was an alleged sexual assault victim of Bowen Turner. His daughter, Dallas, was bullied and harassed as a result of her victimization and died by a self-inflicted wound on November 14, 2021. As a result, the case against Bowen Turner was dismissed. Mr. Stoller and his entire family have been staunch advocates for victims' rights and legislative and judicial reform in favor of crime victims. Carl?
Good morning. Before I begin, I would like to thank Sarah Ford and her staff at SC Van for having me here today to speak. More importantly, I would like to thank you all for being here this morning. Your presence gives me hope that the majority of my fellow South Carolinians are ready for change and ready to fight for victims. Our family's story begins on a fall night in October of 2018. On that night, our daughter, Dallas Hayes Stoller, attended a party in Danbury County, South Carolina. On that night, she became a victim of sexual assault. Little did I know this would be the beginning of the end of our beautiful daughter. As a little over 3 years later, she would succumb to a self-inflicted injury. Dallas was a beautiful young lady with loads of potential, a bright future, and a heart as big as the world itself. After that fateful night, I watched a system I so strongly believed in, aid in destroying our child's life and severely injuring the lives of 2 other young ladies who are also victims in this case. I watched the good old boy system start its engines and work its magic for a well-connected defendant. I watched as a 3rd young lady became a victim exactly 41 days later at the hands of this defendant while he was out on unmonitored bond for the sexual assault of our daughter. I watched as a sitting South Carolina state senator stood in a courtroom in Orangeburg County, South Carolina, and publicly slut-shamed this young lady. I watched the deputy solicitor of the 2nd Judicial Circuit drop our daughter's case because she was no longer here to face her attacker. Lastly, in April of 2022, I watched a circuit court judge allow this defendant to walk away with a 5-year probationary sentence for assault and battery 1st degree, no sex offender registry, and an ability to have his record fully expunged once he completed the terms of his probation. That, my friends, is what justice for victims looks like here in South Carolina. Out front in the public eye, our courts, some solicitors, some attorneys, etc., say openly victims matter. They argue this whole lawyer-legislator thing and the way we appoint our judges has no impact on justice for our victims. They argue we are only making noise because things didn't work out for our daughter and other victims. I say they are very wrong. We have been silent for exactly a year now. We have been silent because we were asked to be. We were told our silence would allow the 2nd Judicial Circuit's Solicitor's Office to take a second look at Dallas's case, admitting privately, to a degree, they had made mistakes regarding her case. Well, folks, this is what our asked for silence has earned us so far. To date, we have received 1 call from their office, and it appears, based on that conversation, we are no further along than we were a year ago. That conversation has left us with even less hope anything will ever be done. I want to say publicly how very proud I am of Dallas's sisters, Brett and Carly, for taking on this fight on behalf of not only their late sister, but also fighting for all victims in our state. Their passion for this fight has ignited a flame in me, and I pray has done the same for you all. I pray their courage has given you the courage to say publicly, enough is enough. That you are no longer willing to accept things as they are and stand ready to fight alongside us to ensure victims are no longer victimized by our system. I implore each and every one of you to fight for real change. Remember, evil knows no boundaries. Evil cares nothing about the balance in your bank account, where you live, how well you were raised, who you know, or what you believe your social standing is. I'm saying no one is exempt from becoming a victim when evil comes knocking. I pray evil never comes to visit you. I pray none of you have to feel or live with what we have to. However, if you do become a victim, I pray together we have made positive change and future victims will be treated with compassion and understanding, not be treated the way many victims are today and not have your rights violated. In closing, I want all our representatives and senators to know we are fighters and no longer will accept things as they are. I've taught my girls to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. I've taught them to stand up for what is right. Always remember, a strong person fights for themselves. A stronger person fights for others. We, as a family, are stronger people and will continue to fight for our late daughter, Dallas, and all victims. We will be silent no longer. Justice for her, justice for Dallas, justice for Chloe, justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Our next two speakers are Ms. Sandy Smith and Mandy Matney. Sandy is the mother of Stephen Smith, a young man killed nearly 8 years ago on a rural highway in Hampton County, South Carolina. Ms. Smith has been fighting for justice for her son for 8 years. Recently, the investigation into that case was reopened, and Stephen's death was officially declared a homicide. Ms. Smith, no doubt, will continue to seek justice for her son, along with Mandy Matney, a journalist who has supported Sandy, become a friend to Sandy, and worked to seek justice in Stephen's case for years, as well as publicly advocating for other victims.
My name is Sandy Smith. I'm the mother of Stephen. Stephen was killed on July 8th of 2015, and his homicide remains unsolved. Stephen was kind. Stephen was smart. Stephen was buried in his medical scrubs because he was on track to become a doctor so that he could help others. But he never got that chance because someone killed him. For 8 years, we have been fighting for Stephen to get the answers in his case. I don't know how to fix the problem that led to my son's murder being mishandled from the beginning, but I do know that I'm thankful to have so many wonderful people helping me to get justice for Stephen. Mandy Matney is joining me here as a friend, but also as an advocate for change. And she has some words to share.
Great to see you. Thank you, Sandy. My name is Mandy Matney. I'm a journalist and an advocate for victims. When I met Sandy in 2019, I was appalled at how public agencies were failing Sandy, failing Stephen, and failing South Carolina. As we dove deeper into Stephen's case, I learned about so many other families who were also failed by public systems that are supposed to protect them, or at the very least, provide equal footing. Yet it seems too often these failures are designed by powerful people in pursuit of unequal applications of justice. Our state house belongs to each of us South Carolinians. And we are here to remind our legislators that each member of our statewide community deserves the same access and benefits of our legal and law enforcement systems. Sandy Smith deserved to have her son's homicide investigated zealously. Dallas Stoller deserved to have law enforcement and the solicitor's office take her seriously. And when local agencies fail victims, it's up to the state to hold local agencies accountable, not provide cover. And when any local agencies fails, we in the media exist to light the lamps that expose those failures, wherever the truth may lead. We give up individual liberty in exchange for the promise that these systems will keep us safe. And this exchange is made with public trust. Each time the justice system overlooks incompetence, collusion, or corruption, that public trust is compromised. Every time someone with access, power, or money manipulates the system to their advantage, public trust is compromised. It's time that we all demand one system of justice, not one for the powerful and another for everyone else. Heinous crimes are committed every day, and there are so many who work tirelessly on the behalf of the victims left in the wake. It seems like our systems are not impervious to a corruption that rots trust from within. Crime and corruption are not always walking hand in hand, but they are often lurking in the shadows where sunlight fails to shine. Thank you, Sandy, Carl, and Dolores, for sharing your bravery. It is a beacon of light to countless others seeking justice. And thank you to all of you who are here today, who wish to make South Carolina change for the better, for the victims. Thank you.
Shannon Nix is the Director of Member Support and Technical Assistance for SCADVASA. She specializes in training on the neurobiology of trauma, intimate partner violence, and has a background as a trauma therapist. Having been involved in the fields of college mental health and interpersonal violence advocacy, prevention, and awareness work for more than 20 years, Shannon believes in approaching this work from an anti-oppression, trauma-informed, evidence-informed, and survivor-centered lens. Shannon?
Good morning. I just want to quickly thank everyone who shared their stories this morning. So impactful. People need to hear them, so thank you. We stand on the steps of the State House today to remind legislators that their decisions and their votes impact the lives of victims and can either support healing or cause further trauma. As this session draws to a close, we can point to some positive movement on bills that will make a difference. Senate Bill 147, sponsored by Senator Shealy, which creates additional protections around confidentiality for survivors of domestic and sexual violence, passed the Senate and will hopefully pass the House next session. House Bill 4158, proposed by Representative Pendarvis, which would allow survivors to terminate a lease without financial penalty so that they can relocate to a safe and confidential location, has passed out of subcommittee and will be taken up by full committee next year. Over 30 other states have laws similar to these. It is good that we are making progress in joining them. Unfortunately, the news is not all good. Senate Bill 143, which adds dating partners to qualifying relationships for orders of protection, continues to be stalled due to some members' discomfort about the implementation of the firearms prohibition on persons subject to an order of protection. The evidence is clear that abusers use guns to threaten and kill victims, children, law enforcement, and other bystanders. Access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely that a woman will die at the hands of their violent partner. In South Carolina, a judge who grants an order of protection must make a specific finding of harm, injury, or threat, and specifically order that they be prohibited from possessing a firearm. We believe that those who have used violence in their relationships have chosen to relinquish their rights to firearms possession. It is a consequence of their actions. While policy choices are made that refuse to acknowledge the danger guns pose in violent relationships, we will continue to witness the heartbreaking high levels of domestic violence homicides. It is our commitment to continue to advocate for this bill and to ensure that all victims of domestic violence have access to the protections available through the family court as they seek to leave an abusive relationship. Today, as we stand on these steps, we are grateful to legislators who are advocates for survivors. And we ask that all elected officials approach their work with a sense of compassion and care for all those who have experienced violence and intimidation.
Next, we will hear from Representative Joe White. Representative White is here to speak about a bill that he has recently presented pushing for judicial reform. He cares about victims. He cares about what we tell him that victims endure in South Carolina. And from what he's heard, he's ready to make change here in the State House for all of us. Representative White.
First, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. When I decided to run for a state house, by the way, I am the oldest freshman ever elected to the South Carolina State House. I was 76 when I ran, and I'm 77 now. My number one issue was judicial reform. And I'll say this about judicial reform. Victims will never be treated fairly by any bill that's passed to help victims until judges are selected properly and they are fair judges. We are the only state in America that elects our judges the way we do. That should tell you that we're not doing it the right way. We have a Judicial Merit Selection Commission consisting of 10 people. 5 of them are appointed by the Speaker of the House. 5 of them are appointed by the Senate. Out of that 10, 8 of them are criminal defense attorneys. You have to go through that committee to get approved to be a judge in South Carolina. That means that those 8 criminal defense attorneys have to approve who their judges are going to be, who they will plead cases in front of. That is a wrong system. Out of those 8 criminal defense attorneys, 6 of them are also lawyer legislators who sit either in the Senate or in the House. They have more power than any of us will ever have. When I ran for office, I told everybody, we the people can. But what I've learned, a reporter asked me about a month ago, what have you learned in your first month at the State House? I said, well, you know, we're taught when we're kids that America is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What I've learned in a month is that government here is of the powerful, by the powerful, and for the powerful. It is up to us, and I'm not Trump, but I like to address the media. Because if the media would bring attention to how we do this in South Carolina, the media could get it stopped. Unless and until we, as the people, raise enough cane, we're not going to get this thing stopped. Here's the problem. When you go campaigning, you know what everybody complains about? They complain about the roads. Some of them complain about education. Very few of them complain about the judicial system, because until your daughter is raped and ends up committing suicide, until your son is murdered, until a lady out here, your brother is murdered and the murderer is put out on bond for $250,000, until that happens, you don't care. It's time that we started caring about these victims, and we put people in, first of all, elect some people that will stand up to this JMSC mess. Secondly, stop the mess of the JMSC. We've got the governor saying he wants to change it. We've got the attorney general saying he wants to change it. My bill, H4183, isn't the complete answer, but it says that lawyer legislators cannot serve on the JMSC anymore. And it says the governor would have the right to appoint some people, not just the head of the Senate and not just the head of the House. So I ask you to look at H4183. I've got 34 sponsors. It's never coming out of committee until we, the people, say it's got to come out of committee. So I thank you. I apologize to all the victims this morning for the fact that our judicial system has failed you. And I just want all of us to pray together and work together to change this injustice system. Thank you.
Veronica Swain Coons was appointed by Governor Nikki Haley as the South Carolina Crime Victim Ombudsman in December of 2013, where she has served ever since. Veronica has served as an instructor for state and national victim service and criminal justice organizations for decades. A survivor of family and sexual violence, Veronica is a passionate advocate for the rights of crime victims and a friend to all of us standing here today.
Thank you all so very much for being here. I believe that Scott Vassa and SC Van invited me to come speak because we are the state's crime victim ombudsman. And that means that we're a liaison between crime victims and the criminal justice process. South Carolina has some of the best laws in the nation for crime victims, yet every day we hear from victims whose cases have gone awry. Something has gone wrong with their system. So we are your problem solvers, crime victims. The staff that I have is amazing. Christina Toller, Sarah Beth Coe, and I work tirelessly to make sure that solicitors, judges, law enforcement officers, probation, the state agencies that serve crime victims are doing their jobs properly. And when they are not, we refer them to some of the amazing lawyers across this state that serve crime victims for free to test the enforceability of crime victims' rights. Now, we have these laws. We have to test whether or not people will comply with these laws. And when they don't, we have answers. So please feel free to pick up a brochure about the Crime Victim Ombudsman's office. We are here for you. We want to support you and fix problems in our broken criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the organizations who have resource tables here, Pathways to Healing, Sister Care, Scott Vassa, SC Van, Bio and Crime Scene Cleanup. We appreciate you being here. We encourage all of you to stop by and get some information from these organizations. South Carolina Victim Assistance Network provides free legal services not only to crime victims, but free technical assistance to law enforcement, prosecutors, courts, when issues arise and solutions to uphold victims' rights are required. Victims and survivors do not have to go through this alone. Far too often, we see things on the news, on Facebook, when things are wrong. We cannot change what we don't understand or acknowledge. I challenge us. I see that there is hope today for victims in South Carolina. We will accept nothing less. While power and privilege seem to reign supreme in South Carolina, to those of us who stand beside victims in a courtroom or those lobbying for change here at the State House, we know that eventually that power will cease to exert that same influence because the people will not allow it. We will not stand for it. The people will choose to protect and advocate for victims and survivors. That's why we're here. As a victim of sexual assault myself, that's why I'm here. I hope that hearing from all of these incredible speakers today will push us all, particularly those here in the State House, to acknowledge the inequities that victims face, demand accountability, and commit to changing and making South Carolina a better place for all victims. Those in power have taken notice of this movement. This is a movement. And the only movement we can make is forward. For Dallas, for Stephen, for Damien, for Gavin, for all victims. We will not back down. Thank you all for being here. We are planning to go into the State House at 10:30 a.m. So a few minutes before that, we will do an advocacy and action so you know who your legislators are and how you can contact them so they can come out of the lobby to meet with you, their constituents. You have that right, and I encourage you to stay to do that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for helping show that victims matter in South Carolina.
If we could get all of our speakers together to take a photo, that would be wonderful.